What's up, peeps? Unsolicited QA here. I'm gonna do a reaction video of calling out devs, Death of a Spaceman. Um, Disclaimer: I've seen this before. Wasn't really paying that much attention because I was doing something else. So now I'm going to actually watch it and kind of comment on it. A bit about me: I'm a video game designer. I went to college for it. I graduated in 2000 something, 19, 18, one of those. Been a long year. Uh, and I'm kind of new to Star Citizen. I bought it in 2019, but 2020 happened, and then a lot of stuff happened, so now I am here. And now I can actually play the game, and I'm getting into it and like seeing the game dev and all that stuff. And from what I see already, it looks amazing. But here we go.
Hey everybody, welcome to Calling All Devs, the series where we take questions from you, the Star Citizen community, and pose them directly to our developers. On this show, we got something a little different, a little special. It's October, it's Halloween time, it's spooky time, and we, of course, are going to talk about Death of a Spaceman. Now, Death of a Spaceman was first introduced back in 2013. We're going to get the update on where we're at now, where we're going forward, and to do so, we have two esteemed guests with us. In no particular order, we got Richard Tyrer from the Core Gameplay Group. Hi, Richard.
Hello, how's it going?
And this is Chris, right?
That is right.
Chris?
The reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated, is what I would think would be the appropriate thing to be said here.
It's been a while since we've chatted. So this one's probably going to go a little bit long. Whatever. We're all very loquacious. So I'm going to sit back. Let's jump into this. Death of a Spaceman as a primer. Let's introduce it to people. We haven't talked about it in a while. Just what is it?
The idea with Death of the Spaceman is to try to get some kind of meaningful consequence to dying in a game. So, like, most games you play, modern games anyway, you die, you respawn back, a few seconds before you die, and you keep on doing it again. So it doesn't really feel like there's much consequence to dying, and a lot of times your gameplay approach is pretty sloppy. I mean, like, I know when I'm playing a standard FPS shooter in the story mode, I just keep blasting into people. I don't really think about it. I die, I start again. Whereas if you play, a game like, say, for instance, Demon Souls, all the years ago, and all the ones past it, there's real consequence. I mean, you die, and you've got to fight back through all those enemies. You've lost all the experience that you gained, the souls, in the case of Demon Souls. But the thing with Demon Souls, and it was one of the things I was playing, it reminded me of the good old, the days in the 80s and the 90s when you'd make games, and dying was had a real consequence. You wanted to finish your level before you died, or else you had to do the level again, right? So and consequently, when you finished the level or achieved something, you really felt proud and happy doing yourself, which is definitely I think one of the mechanics that makes Demon Souls and its subsequent games both infuriating and rewarding when you manage to do it.
Yeah, this is pretty big actually, because it's interesting to really think about. Games in general have gone away from being extremely brutal. Like, if you're like me, I'm in my 30s. I grew up on Nintendo, Ninja Gaiden, Kung Fu, things like that. And then the more mainstream the video games became, the less that, like, death actually meant something. Really, the biggest thing, like MMO wise, the biggest game that really changed the entire spectrum of that is WoW. WoW, obviously, World of Warcraft is extremely popular, and at the time of which it came out, it was actually kind of brutal when it came out, but not as brutal as other games. Like, I played UO, I played Star Wars Galaxies. Star Wars Galaxies, you had to go get healed after, so you couldn't just keep on respawning. Like, if you died, you had to go get healed. Like scars, you owe if you died, you lose your stuff, or you know, it's all everything that you had was lootable, right, by anybody. And then eventually, what happened is that people, the gaming industry, kind of shifted towards becoming less less brutal. Then there's now Demon Souls and Dark Souls and things like that. Those type of games are considered brutal, but like they're kind of the exception. They're not the rule, right? The rule is Mario or I play League of Legends, right? Like dying in League of Legends is okay. They get more money, but like you just come back in a few seconds. There's not really a big cost, unless you're at the top levels, and that's a different story. But like so, Star Citizen, especially because the progression of this game is the only progression in this game is money, right? Like they sell or they are selling uh, they are like the have good thoughts. The ships are pretty much classes. If you really think about what's happening with the ships, like to explore, you need an exploration ship. To fight, you need a fighter, right? You can do the different things, right? You can explore a little bit with basic ship, but you're not going to do it at a high level. And then you can fight, like I have an Avenger Titan. I can fight in my Avenger Titan, but really, will I be able to take a Gladius, right? That's set up for it, and it's just a different. So the classes are considered different. The ships are different classes in my head, and there's progression. So people that have big ships, are their level is higher theoretically. They can make more money faster, right? They're able to do big operations, but like, what's the consequences of doing that stuff, right? You don't want to have, like, with the game design, you can't have a game that is not limited, because then it's boring, right? Like, you have to give, like, game design and playing video games about solving problems and challenges. Like, you have to challenge the player. So it's super important for games to actually challenge the player and not have it so that it, like, what they get means nothing. And right now, that's one of the biggest issues with alpha, is that nothing really means anything. But that's because it's an alpha, right? When it becomes, when it goes gold, then that's going to change some. So, yeah.
So kind of the idea was like, what kind of consequence can we have in our persistent universe in terms of, how do we encourage the players to stay alive? How do we encourage the players to keep their ship or repair their ship intact? We don't want people to just go, oh, I got a scratch, I'm just going to respawn in a perfectly, pristine state for, the character or the ship. And so Death of the Spaceman was sort of an idea to give an association with your player character in the game, in terms of, this is who you are, and you want to keep yourself alive as possible, as much as possible, and identify with your avatar as an actual real person and character, and you care about, and you want to keep alive. And then finally, when you've had one too many close calls or lost one too many battles, you no longer can be resuscitated, and you have to pass on essentially to your next of kin, which will have you call out basically who your next of kin is when you're sort of doing your character creation. And that idea is whether it's passing it down to your son or your daughter or a relative or a friend or whatever it would be, you call that out, and when that does, your possessions and reputation kind of pass down, but not all of them, right? So there's always like there's inheritance tax, and there's the sins of the father aren't fully invested on the son, but there's a little bit of that. And so, the idea would be, you would want to, live as long and a healthy life as possible before you pass on to your progeny or whatever. And so that was the inspiration of Death of the Spaceman, to really give a sense of kind of close association with your avatar and your character. And if at the end of the day you've got to be there at your, essentially, the God view of the funeral of the character that you spent a year or so adventuring around Star Citizen, there should be a tear in your eye when it happens. And so that was the goal. And so it was really a mechanic of how can we do that inside the game, inside our science fiction setting, which was coming up with this concept of in the future, with all the medical science we have, in states that you may consider you would be dead now, you would not be able to be brought back to life or repaired. Potentially we could do that in the future, but maybe we could only do it so many times. And so, in some ways, it's a little like the old school of you've got so many lives, right? And once your lives are done, the game's over. And the concept was that that maybe the more the worse the death, you're in some big fireball. That's more serious in terms of the lives you lose off your character than it would be if you were down and bleeding out and someone came and got you and managed to repair you, fix you up in the medical table or a hospital. And the idea would be, you would want to not run out of lives, and potentially there could be things you could do over time, go get some gene therapy or whatever that maybe add a life back to you or whatever. But I'm talking lives in a gamer sense here, but in general, we're trying to put it inside the fiction of the world. But the idea is to have real persistence to your avatar and wear and tear. It's also one of the reasons why we've got things like wear in the game. It's essentially one of the things that we have for equipment, we're going to have for characters. You're going to get older, things are going to get old, and all of that. We have parts of that in the game, but it's not fully working. But that's all systems that are on the plan or we need to turn on properly, because that's part of the problem with what we're doing right now is we're building this incredibly complicated, interconnected sort of simulation system, and not all the pieces are there quite yet. So even though we built some of the pieces and we can functionally do stuff with them, because the other pieces aren't there, the whole system doesn't work yet. And that is actually one of the challenges of building a game the way we're building it, sort of while people are playing how we're building it. Death of Spaceman is a good example, because it's something that I talked about at the very beginning as a core concept. It's always been a core concept, but we're only just now getting around to starting to implement the actual functionality and the gameplay features that will enable it. And I think when you have it, that will make people behave very differently in the verse, which is going to be super cool.
Yeah. Before it goes to the designer, a lot of that was, well, I can't really say what it was, but like this is a very, or one of the most important mechanics in the game, because of what I kind of talked about earlier. And I think him talking about it's one of the core staples of the game. Everything else can change, but like the way that death is dealt with, it can change in iteration, but the thing is that like it has to hit certain design goals and pillars, right? It has to hit that it just needs to be rough when you die, like at that limit, right? It can't just be, oh, I died, like Call of Duty respawn, whatever. It has to be harsh, because he kind of talks about it, but they just need to mean something. Like it just needs to mean something, and you don't go out willy nilly and just die, like just whatever. Another thing that's interesting too, this is a, like, if it says it in the name, and like it's Star Citizen, and the whole game is about being a citizen in this universe, right? You're not special in a way, like you're not some crazy awesome hero. You're just some people, or some guy or some girl that is running around trying to get make their way through in the galaxy. And that's what's really cool about the game, and adding this stuff and putting this stuff here in it kind of helps that too. Every design choice is actually going towards that citizenship thing, if you really think about it. And we'll talk about that later.
Now, you buried the lead there at the end. That's big news. We are now beginning the process of actively putting this into development. It's been this idea, it's been this core tenet of Star Citizen's character since it was first introduced. You just gave us a wonderful refresher, so the page is still on the website. If you haven't read it, you want to read even more detail, you can check that out, but that basically brings everybody up to speed with where we're at here. Now, Richard, we are...
Just real quick with that, what for me and like design talk wise, what that means is they've had meetings about what it is going to look like, but like just now they're typing in buttons, like typing and trying to code it, and so it's way, I think it's pretty far off. Like I don't I just if you're thinking about and wanting to see like how long this is going to be, is pretty far off, because it just, that's kind of what the design speak tells me, like it's how he's talking, but we'll see. Like, I mean, they are really good at programming and all that stuff, right? Like they couldn't do what they do with so it could be quicker. We can see a prototype pretty quick, but I don't even think it's in prototype phase right now, the way that he's talking. But I could be wrong, and this is completely speculation. So
we're beginning the process of putting these things into active development, of that process where we're going to start working on it, start testing these ideas, building our Tier 0 implementations. Where do we start?
So, well, we've already kind of started. So body dragging was the first feature that we released that kind of gave you the premise to be able to manipulate, dead bodies. But as Chris calls out, death is going to be a really important factor in Star Citizen. Now, death, there's kind of three deaths along the spectrum. There's kind of what we're calling like the down state. So that's kind of like when your health has gone to 0 and you're there. And when you're in that scenario, you'll be able to kind of choose to kind of stay there and be like, okay, I need my buddies to come and rescue me. I need the, law enforcement to come and help me, or maybe I've paid for some insurance that rescues my body or something like that. Then there is the kind of like, you've died in terms of you've given up the ghost, nobody's coming, you're like, okay, that's it, I'm leaving that body there and I'm going to go back to a hospital and be revived. But that's kind of part of your DNA. That DNA is kind of going to be reimpregnated into essentially a clone of you. And then you'll be able to then go back to your location and you'll be able to see, your dead body there. And as long as nobody's been there, you'll be able to retrieve your gear and so on and so forth. And then the third aspect in terms of like you passing on to your next of kin and that kind of thing. So what we're actually evaluating now is kind of how this is integrated into kind of like the core healing gameplay and the actor status. So we already did kind of some of the actor status with, temperature in terms of hypothermia and hyperthermia and things like, starvation and things. And what we want to do now in terms of the next iteration of this is what we call like the healing and actor status T1. And what that will do is introduce drugs. So you'll have a blood drug level and you'll be able to manipulate things, but it will also introduce all the different statuses that are surrounding you as a character. So for example, when you're in battle and you take a really bad wound to the arm, you might say, okay, I've got a fracture, so my arm, I've got a permanent fracture. I'd have to go back to the hospital to get that repaired. Otherwise, I'm going to start to suffer some status effects that is surrounding that. But if you keep taking damage and you keep taking more damage, that fracture might turn into an actual break, and then it might turn into actually coming out of your arm kind of thing. And the level of that status will dictate the level of cover and level of healing that you need to get to go and basically get that healed, so you can go to a med bay and get them repaired. But it also allows other people to act as like support roles and come to say help you. And let's say you've got a really bad broken leg, which means that you can't walk anymore because you haven't just like fallen over and taken a little scratch. You've repeatedly taken damage in your leg and not gone you've not gone to heal it, because medipens, for example, will no longer just be like, oh, I'm a medipen, I'm full health. You will have these permanent statuses like hypothermia and hyperthermia, and so you'll have to have those will only be able to be removed when you go to these locations, either a medical bay in a ship or a medical bay at these hospital locations. So when essentially you go into that downed state, that's where body dragging will come in, so that people can come in and drag your body back to the medical facility. We're going to have obviously the medical gun in terms of the multi-tool attachment. We'll be able to inject essentially the material that's inside the medipens, but a stronger version of that. So the medipens will basically turn into something that is kind of stabilizing you in the moment, You'll still be able to like replenish your health, but if you've got a bleed or something like that, it'd be like a clotting agent that stops that bleed, and that kind of allows you to get back to safety. And at that moment in time, you can then go, okay, do I want to push on? But I've got this status effect that's kind of, causing, if I go back to the fracture arm, my weapon's now swaying more, and similar to how we had the eyeball effects with the other things, and that progression of the active status T1 in terms of the different limb statuses that you're going to have in terms of whether you've got a traumatic brain injury, whether you've got leg injuries, whether you've got arm injuries, whether you've got internal bleeding in terms of your organs. The level of those statuses will basically go up and go up to the point of view where you're like, I can no longer function now, and I need somebody to come out. And you'll have plenty of opportunity to back out. So it's not going to be something that's going to be like, oh, hello, you've broken your legs, and that's it. It's going to be something like the other actor statuses that is like, okay, you're going to have junction points where you can make a decision where you're like, should I go on? And it's that moment like in the Arctic, I'm close to the edge, but I might lose my toes. So, if essentially what we
And that's, he just pointed out, he just hit something pretty big, is designers always try to, as much as possible, give choice to the player. So depending on the design of the game, but like in this game, that's it. It's just which choices that they're making, right? And then consequences after. There's always a consequence for your choice in video games. If you really think about it, so there's consequences. And figuring out, do I need to push forward? Do I not? It's like a risk reward type thing. Some people talk about it, like Astropub and things like that. Like they, risk reward gameplay. Like this is part of the risk reward gameplay. It's like, do I continue on? Do I push through this goal? Do I do this, to get to this goal? So it's interesting. A lot of this stuff in my brain, like he's saying this stuff. I forget his name. I apologize, person. But like he's saying this stuff, and there's a lot of maybes. So like it sounds like medical gameplay is not really even being worked on yet. I could be completely wrong. This is also like I forgot the word again. Speculating, because this like it's iterating, right? They're going through and saying, okay, medipens. All right, we can do health now. That's very needed. Then there's dragging bodies and stunning and things like that. But it doesn't sound like a lot of this stuff is being worked on. It sounds like these are ideas right now that are eventually that gotten through that filtering process of the design talks, and then eventually they're going to break it down some more. Like there's a lot of stuff that he just said, and a lot of it just doesn't seem it doesn't seem like it's being worked on yet with the medical gameplay. I could be wrong. It's I'm not there, but it's just what I'm thinking. So but yeah, it's like he's just talking about risk reward, and that entire thing was kind of risk reward of like, do I take the injury or not, and what kind of injuries and things like that. So
we're working on right now is that kind of like healing circle and that healing gameplay. And it also allows that cooperative gameplay that when you do go into this down state, which covers like it's the first version of the 3 death states kind of thing, that's the state where you don't want to go to the next stage, because as soon as you go to the next stage, that is what Chris touched on in terms of like, it's almost like the DNA integrity, because you're going to go to the hospitals. When we release this, it'll be your hospitals will be live in the locations. You'll be able to go to these hospitals and almost like download your DNA matrix into the hospital database and say, okay, like if my body is unrecoverable or my friends can't get to me, then I'm gonna kind of die and have to be recloned into this body. That my DNA is gonna have to be re-imprinted into this shell. And during that process, that's the process where your DNA can kind of fracture or kind of lose some of its integrity. And that is kind of what Chris touched on in terms of like you're losing a life in terms of gameplay terms. So, and that is what's happening as it's being imprinted into you. And depending on the manner of your death, and depending on like, if you've just been ignoring all of these statuses and all of your arms don't work and your legs don't work and you've got a brain bleed, some of that DNA integrity as it's been injected back into your body can be re-inherited from those from those basically systemic statuses that you've had, and that means that you might come back in your body with a prosthetic arm, or you might come back that your eye color has changed, or you're not as tall as you used to be, and because there's something that's gone wrong with that DNA imprinting. So that's kind of what we're working towards now in terms of that hospital healing gameplay loop, actor status, the extension of the actor status system that we went live with before, and obviously body dragging and all of that, kind of setting your spawn point in terms of game terms and the live. That's the stuff that we're working on right now, and to be honest, that's going to be a significant change in how people play the game, because when you go to the next or the third stage, where you're shedding your tear, I'm not shedding my tear at the character I've lost. I'm shedding my tear at the inheritance tax that I've just been levied. And it's at that stage, that permanent death where you're having to pass on to your next of kin, where it is the sins of the father. You're still going to have some of your reputational statuses, but they may not be as high as they were, because it's like, oh, your dad was part of XYZ, but you're going to have to prove yourself. And so and that kind of loop is a really unique aspect in terms of an MMO, and that really ties into that death has a real meaningful consequence. Like in Demon Souls, the amount of times you get to the boss and you're like, you get to that 1%, and your palms are sweaty, and you're moving the mouse and you're like, no, that all of a sudden changes. When you get to the edge of that cave and you're like, yeah, I'm just going to go in there, and if I find something in there that's not friendly to me, then I'll just respawn. No, now it's going to be like, well, if I respawn, what happens to my ship? Am I going to lose my gear? I'm going to have to come back to it, because obviously physical inventory ties into it, and then, oh, will I lose some of my DNA integrity, and how's that? And all of a sudden, it changes the choices you make along the journey that you're going on, and that is critical.
Yeah, one of the other things we're doing is that we're not going to be despawning player bodies anymore. So when you die, the body that's there and all the equipment will stay there. So if you end up having to be sort of recloned, you could essentially go back to where you died and recover some of your stuff and see the skeleton of your previous incarnation. But the other thing I would say is that the cost of sort of the new life, basically, and you're only going to have so many of these because they degrade, is much more than getting rescued or having someone come and grab you and fix you up. So there will also be an economic incentive to live, to essentially not just go, oh yeah, I'm just going to respawn, because A, you're only going to get a very limited number of those, and B, they're going to be very expensive. So you would prefer to have other players or your friends or a service come and get you and fix you up. And I think that'll be really useful and important, because even in gameplay, okay, if I'm now exploring in a corner of the universe that doesn't really have a lot of people, my level of risk there is much higher than if I'm in the middle of a really well-traveled area of space. I think in terms of gameplay, things like finally getting around to the full sort of health, death of a spaceman setup and the physical inventory, the gameplay potential and just what's going to happen and the interplay with players is there's not other games that I think of that quite have all this stuff all together to do this at this level of detail. And I personally, I just think I'm super excited to have these come together. We talked about them for a long time. Obviously, it's taken a while, but that's because we're building something incredibly high fidelity with all this detail, but with all this scope. But it really will change a lot of the gameplay mechanics. A lot of how people are playing the game right now, just you wouldn't want to do. It just wouldn't make sense, and I think that's super exciting.
Yeah, and another thing is that it creates I don't know, I forgot the word. It creates something gameplay, like it creates opportunities for players to actually create corporations or whatever around this thing of corpse retrieval, right? Or body retrieval, right? In other games, it's kind of like, okay, you have to go back or whatever, or you just you spawn with the stuff and it's broken, right? But in In this, like you can actually have somebody, you can pay somebody to go and get your corpse, right? And it's just very interesting. It's very interesting. It's kind of like the fuel rats in Elite Dangerous, right? Like no matter where you are in the galaxy in Elite Dangerous, they'll come and get you. You go on the little board, you say, "Hey, I'm here." They'll come and fly right all the way there and get you, and then you can live. So it's just very interesting.
Yeah. And hope
No, not immersive. Anyway.
hopefully you can see some of the method to the madness of the development, because it's not like, hey, overnight we go, hey, let's just add this cool thing. It's like, okay, it's underpinning these things. So when we add like actor status, when we add eating and drinking, when we add physical imagery, when we add the ability to hold things in the hand from the grenade from throw T1, all of that is tying into the bigger picture of what we want to achieve. And that core gameplay loop of, I'm not just stepping into my ship and flying into space and I could just open my PMA and just have access to everything I want, and there's no consequence, there's no feeling of that you're in the world because of you have this access to this infinite bag of holding. This consequence of, I'm going on a real adventure, the things that I take with me are the things that I have access to. The ships that I have dictate how much storage I have and how much, what I have access to inside those ships. Do I have a kitchen that provides me food and drink? Do I have a medical bay? Have I got room to take a buddy with me? Is he going to wear support armor that allows more replenishment of the medical gun, that can revive me when I'm down in the cave and we can get out together? All of a sudden that becomes not just a single player, oh, I've just got access. All of a sudden those shared experiences are the things that make it a true experience. And that is something that all of these individual systems, in isolation, they're really cool, and we put a lot of effort and a lot of heart into them, and they're complex because we want it to be scalability on a size of Star Citizen. But when you pull them all together and they start talking to each other and they start, okay, have you got space for the amount of food and drink you need? Have you got space for ammo? What guns are you taking? Am I going to take the grenade launcher? Well, I can only fit so many magazines of that. Well, maybe I should take an energy rifle because that recharges. And all of those different decisions, all of that ties into making it, that's when all of a sudden you go, hold on a minute, the game was already there. We just needed to have these systems start talking to each other.
Yeah.
That's big too. Like there's a lot of mechanics in the game, like, but it's not a game yet, right? My biggest thing of like what will make this like into a game, is the quantum system, and we can talk about that later. But he's just right. Like it's a lot of different mechanics that are just out there, right? And once they start coming together, then it starts feeling more real. Then it starts feeling more like like an experience, right? Versus like it's I go mine, and I'm doing that mechanic. I'm mining, like it's a mining mechanic. I come back and I sell, like that's it. Versus I refine, and then maybe that then somebody takes that to a place of which they're building a base or something, right? So it's once everything's there, then that's when it starts feeling better. And it's a lot of it's there. Not a lot of it's there, but a bunch of it's there now. Like, and we can talk about that later too. But yeah, I agree with all that stuff that you just said, and it's cool like to see. It's cool to see the it being made during, right? This is one of the coolest things about this as Star Citizen, is being able to see it being made, and like seeing, like as a game designer myself, like being able to see the the iteration, and like they're what they're choosing to put band-aids on, right? They like it's all right now, it's a whole bunch of band-aids in a whole bunch of different places because they're working on some stuff, right? So this is very interesting.
I feel like at some point we need to rebrand this to the life and death, and then in parentheses, and taxes of a spaceman. It would be the more appropriate.
Ultimately, we do joke a little bit about, but the goal with Star Citizen is to, essentially it's a virtual life. And we are trying to simulate, or obviously in a more primitive state than the real world, but simulate all the things that would happen. Like naturally you would think, okay, if I'm going to go to the Antarctic, I've got to like bring my supplies with me, I've got to worry about if I get hurt and all these things that I think great gameplay opportunities, and also great cooperative gameplay opportunities, right? So there's a lot of things that we talked about that clearly, if you're going to be adventuring in a dangerous place, having the equipment and having people with you is probably a good thing, because otherwise something goes wrong, you're by yourself. And so I feel like when we get a lot of, there's been a lot of engineering just on the very low level and some scalable stuff that we have to do to enable a lot of these systems. And but over the next year or 2 years, we've got a lot of this stuff sort of coming online, and I feel like when they all start interoperating together, that it will be an experience like no other. I mean, I don't know another game that does it to the level. I mean, there's some games that do, some really nice. I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2 is great. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that sort of does elements of this, but I think not to the scope and the level and the detail that we're doing. And that's one of the reasons why it's taking so long. So I mean, that is, it's definitely taking longer than I'd like it to do, and it's part of my frustration when people are like, well, where's my gameplay loops? And I'm like, but it's going to be so awesome. You've got all these elements, and I know the big picture. I know how they're all going to pull together. And it's just one of the things that when you're making a game live, developing in front of people, the people experience you wouldn't normally. Like normally most game developers will tell you in the old way, so it certainly was when I was making the Wing Commanders and all the rest of stuff, and Richard probably can opinion on on all the ones that he was making, that the game really only comes together near the end, right? So you work on all these disparate parts, and you do it for years, especially in today's world. People will work on it for years and years and years, and then it really only comes together sort of kind of in that sort of alpha to beta stage. And we're sort of, I know we say we're alpha, but we still got a lot of features to come. And normally a traditional alpha would be you've got your features there, but you don't have all your content polished, and then beta is all content and features are in there, and you're working on the bugs. So a lot of it doesn't. I mean, like Wing Commander, you weren't playing through until a couple of months before we released the game, and it was all in different pieces. But in the way we do Star Citizen, people see us develop all these pieces in different parts, and they go, "Well, why you got that? That just seems silly."
And that's what's crazy is like the alpha wise, like the amount of technology that's going into the game is ridiculous. Like if you look at the planets themselves, like I can go from a space station to a planet like Arcor or Microtech or whatever, and go down, no loading screen, come back up, go to a different place, 0 loading screens, right? That technology is just ridiculous, and it looks good. That's a huge thing too. Well, yeah, I have a monster computer, so it runs well on my computer. But it's like if I were to predict like how long will this game stay in alpha for, it's probably about 5 more years, because it's just gonna be like they're gonna get iCache, and then what's gonna happen is they're gonna add a whole bunch of stuff, right? And we can talk about this later too, but like you add them a whole bunch of stuff, and then that stuff's going to start interacting, and then bugs and stuff are going to come up. And also, it's they don't know if it's really fun until it's actually in the game. So that's a different topic too.
That you're focusing on this aspect over here, when I don't have this other thing over here. Well, we have a plan. They're all working. We're working on all those pieces, and when they all come together, it's going to be a great experience. You already there's elements of it now, so you can sort of go around an event, run around the verse, and yes, there's going to be a lot more, but there's already fun stuff to do, and there's the social aspect of it, and I see amazing videos every single day. It's like one of the funnest things for me to see cool videos by whoever. Like there was one that Terada just did, and I 311 that was shared around here, and there was someone. I mean, the point is, this is really cool stuff that people are doing with the sandbox we're building, even though the sandbox isn't finished. But whether it's me or Richard or Todd Pappy or Tony Zerovec, we're all operating at the level of we see the matrix. We just haven't built all the elements of the matrix yet. But we know it's coming together, and when it's done, it'll be like this amazing simulation. And our only frustration is because it's it's not like me and Richard are like, oh yeah, guys, take longer. It's like me and Richard and Todd and everyone else are like, is it really going to take you that long to do that feature? You sure you can't do that in half the time? So we're always on their case. So I know everyone out there is on our cases, but it's sort of like we're on the other way around. But some of this stuff just takes time to build it, to test it, and also to do it when you're doing it in a live game, right? Because we are building it in a live game, so you can't just break everything by introducing a new feature. You've got to make sure the old features work as well.
That's another thing. One of the biggest reasons why it's taking so long is because it goes live. And it's not like it's a horrible thing, but just the way that development is that is it's good to keep the just you can have the hood open, right, and just working on it. But if they have to go to live each time, then they have to kind of make it so it's actually digestible for players, right? So they can't just have bugs. There's bugs everywhere in the game, but game breaking bugs, right? That's a big thing. They can't just leave those in. They have to kind of fix those. So, and then that's 9 hours.
But to be honest with you, it's actually a fun way to do it, because a lot of how we're doing it also informs our development as we go along. Because yes, we've got our big plans, but some of the feedback we get helps tweak how things are coming in, or what areas we'll address, or what things worked well, or what things didn't work well that we need to adjust. And if you were doing it the old way, you wouldn't get that feedback. You'd just basically put it all out there. It'd be your best shot at it, and then you'd be like, oh shit, well, we gotta fix this thing or improve this thing, and so I like it. And also just people experiencing what we're building so far is awesome for the team as well, because the team they get all inspired when they see cool stuff that the community is doing. So there's upsides and downsides to what we're doing, but I wouldn't change it for the world, because I think it's one of the funnest things I've ever done in games, and it's awesome.
Talking about reading the Matrix, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm the guy sitting here for 6 years now trying to do an online correspondence course, how to read the Matrix. Every week, just I gotcha. We are at time at this point. The wonderful thing about interviewing either Chris or Richard is that I come with all these questions, and I only ever have to ask one, because then they just kind of just hit everything. I'm like, I don't have to ask that. I don't have to ask that. Before we let you go, just one final thing. For some folks, this is going to be kind of...
All right, so that's pretty much it. They're gonna ask questions and stuff, but yeah. So Death of the Spaceman is super important. It has to, I'd say, get right, but it has this is making the game mean something, right? And because if you're God mode, then you're just nothing means anything, and you're just running around, and it's just a space simulation, and then that kind of gets tired after a while. Versus having the excitement, right? I played Eve online, and I remember getting in fights and just having my heart pound, and I'm just pounding, I'm like, oh geez, it's, and I die, and I'm like, oh, I actually rage quit from that game once, because I was just like, I can't believe I just lost 1 billion creds, right? And that's what, that's the type of gameplay that I think it sounds like they're going for. And getting it so that it's really just nice to be, or nice, but really just like you go out and you have to think about what you're doing before you actually do it, kind of like The Witcher, right? It brings up some stuff, you have to prepare before you fight a monster in The Witcher. It's the same way that I feel, is that you have to go, and you're going to go to this system out here in the middle of nowhere, and you have to prepare. You have to bring food, and bring water, and bring environmental shoots and shit like that. So yeah, so that's Death of a Spaceman. I'm gonna just assume it's pretty far out. So just the way that they're talking, the way that it kind of just is going. So I would definitely suggest to just don't get all oh, it's coming to next week. It's not. It's probably at least a year out. And then one of the things though that I that needs to be addressed before is like the 30Ks and the things like that, to see like the game has to be more stabilized, and the game has to be you know, that you like right now you just die and it's like, okay, I died, like, you know, okay, like I crashed or whatever. Shit, sometimes I die on purpose so I can just fast travel, right? And you know, that's part of like, that's, it needs to get to a point of which, like, you know, you just don't randomly die or get bugged out or something like that. And then yeah, so that, so, and then also I think the medical gameplay has to come before really Death of the Spaceman. I'm not sure. I'm not. I know kind of like he was talking about the direction of what the medical gameplay looks like, but I'm not actually sure what's like in my mind I don't have them as like, I think Death of the Spaceman is dependent on medical gameplay. So yeah, that's it. So anything else? No. So thanks for watching. You know, leave some comments down below. Discuss about this stuff. I'm, you know, if you have ideas and you know, you're just like, hey, this thing. I am gonna be going through and doing a lot more reactions and like going through a lot of the backlog of the videos, because like I said, I'm pretty new, so like I got it, like, you know, I'll do an intro video, but yeah, so just comment, sub if you want to. Appreciate the time that you watched, if you watched this long, and thanks for watching. So talk to you later.